Welcome back to our news bulletin. We start with US, which has now become the epicenter of the new coronavirus, surpassing China with over 85,000 infections. Worldwide figures by Johns Hopkins University show the death toll tops 24,000. This report will now tell you more.
With the world economy and healthcare systems reeling under the new coronavirus pandemic, the US is now in the eye of the storm. But President Donald Trump insists he will open businesses soon and won't cancel the Republican National Convention in North Carolina, come what may. Yet the US president calls on other countries to stop the spread of the virus.
The United States is working with our friends and partners around the world to stop the spread of the virus and coordinate our efforts. We discussed how vitally important it is for all of our nations to immediately share information and data, and we've been doing that to a large extent, but we'll do it even more so.
Countries around the globe continue to take strict measures in a bid to contain the deadly pandemic. South Africa and Congo have begun enforcing a 3-week nationwide lockdown. Leading the world in containing the virus, President Xi Jinping called for an all-out global war against the pandemic.
The COVID-19 outbreak is spreading worldwide. At such a moment, it is imperative for the international community to strengthen confidence, act with unity and work together in a collective response. We must comprehensively step up international cooperation and foster great synergy so that humanity as one could win the battle against such a major infectious disease.
China says from March 28th, foreigners are temporarily banned from entering the country to stop imported cases of the COVID-19 virus.
Meanwhile, Canada has opposed a US proposal to station troops on their shared international border. Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland called the move unnecessary, saying it could damage bilateral relations. Freeland said it was not the right way to treat a trusted friend and military ally. Earlier, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said Canada was looking to keep the longest unmilitarized border in the world the way it was. About 400,000 crossings are made every day with about $1.9 billion worth of goods through the border. Earlier on Wednesday, Trudeau and US President Donald Trump closed the border to all non-essential travel to contain the coronavirus spread. Moreover, Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro has lambasted Washington after the U.S. indicted him and several top Venezuelan officials on charges of narco-terrorism. Maduro branded his U.S. counterpart Donald Trump as a racist cowboy, while also criticizing Colombia and Brazil. Venezuela's Foreign Minister Jorge Arrizia said drug trafficking charges against Maduro showed the desperation of the U.S. elite. Earlier, the U.S. State Department set up a bounty of $15 million for information leading to Maduro's arrest and conviction. Maduro accused the U.S., its regional allies, and the Venezuelan opposition of conspiring to kill the country's political and military leadership.
The government of Donald Trump, in an action that is extravagantly extremist, vulgar, miserable, he put out there a number of false accusations like a racist cowboy of the 19th century who puts a price on the head of revolutionaries. We are ready to take them on whatever the environment, to continue beating them. I say to Donald Trump, you are miserable, Donald Trump.
Because of the coronavirus pandemic, a meeting of NATO foreign ministers scheduled for 2nd April will be held by a video conference. The alliance said Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg will chair the secure teleconference. The meeting will focus on the economic impact of the pandemic on allied defense budgets. It will also focus on the latest developments for NATO's missions in Afghanistan and Iraq. The statement said precautionary measures are in place at NATO headquarters to limit further spread of the coronavirus. It said the measures also include restricted access to visitors, media, and non-essential staff. Delegations urged Stoltenberg to abandon his plans to hold a physical meeting given the lockdowns imposed worldwide. Moving on to Yemen, where the government coalition and Houthi rebels claim to have repelled each other's air attacks. This comes after the warring parties welcomed a UN call for a truce to fight the coronavirus pandemic. Coalition spokesman Turki al-Malki says they destroyed drones launched by rebels towards Saudi cities of Abha and Khamis Mushayth. Al-Malki said the drones were aimed at civilian targets. Meanwhile, rebel spokesperson Yahya Sari says Houthis intercepted coalition forces' aircraft over the Yemeni city of Marib. The rebels' leader, Abdul Malik al-Houthi, has offered Saudi Arabia a prisoner swap in exchange for members of Hamas group. Yemen has been mired in a conflict for the past 5 years between Iran-allied rebels and Saudi-backed government forces. Meanwhile, the U.S. is cutting millions of dollars in aid to northern Yemen over unacceptable interference by the Houthi rebels. This comes amid multiple pleas from aid groups that the reduction will severely impede efforts to confront the looming coronavirus crisis. A U.S. aid spokesperson says the Houthis have not made sufficient progress towards ending meddling in the region. The spokesperson said the organization will continue funding the most urgent life-saving assistance. The US and UK, along with other donors, have complained for months about rebels trying to slap taxes on aid projects in Yemen. Earlier, aid group Oxfam said the cutbacks will result in a reduction in sanitation schemes, vital in the event of COVID-19 pandemic. Moving on, Israel says it has intercepted a drone of Lebanon-based group Hezbollah in its airspace. In a statement, the military said it shot down the UAV while it was crossing from Lebanon into Israeli airspace. It said the Israeli forces have captured the drone. The statement said Israel holds the Lebanese government responsible for the offensive. It said the incident is a violation of Israeli sovereignty and is being seen with great severity. After being elected Parliament Speaker, Israel's ex-military chief Benny Ganz has called for an emergency unity government. Addressing the Knesset, Ganz said unusual circumstances require extraordinary decisions. Ganz won the speakership vote with 74 lawmakers in favor and 18 against in the 120-seat chamber. Ganz succeeded Netanyahu ally Yuli Edelstein, who resigned on Wednesday after a row with the judiciary. This could lead to an alliance with his rival Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that will have to jointly fight the coronavirus outbreak. Ganz was tasked with forming a government following the last vote earlier this month. Israel has been mired in a political crisis that has seen the country hold 3 inconclusive elections in less than a year. Pakistan says Saudi Arabia is reviewing the decision to hold this year's Hajj because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said the kingdom wrote a letter to Pakistan's Ministry of Religious Affairs. Qureshi said Riyadh has asked Islamabad to temporarily halt its preparations for the annual pilgrimage. He said there is a spike in COVID-19 patients in the kingdom. The letter said the gathering of hundreds of thousands of people on Hajj can be dangerous in view of the coronavirus outbreak. Meanwhile, Turkey has postponed all transactions for Hajj amid the pandemic until further notice. Saudi Arabia has reported 3 deaths and 1,112 confirmed cases of the coronavirus. India has announced a $23 billion economic stimulus plan to give relief to millions of poor people hit by a nationwide lockdown. The country has so far recorded over 600 virus infections and 20 deaths.
Speaking in New Delhi, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman said the government has come up with a package for the people's welfare. The minister said that the government wants to distribute 5 kilograms of essential food grains to each person over the next 3 months. Sitharaman said the government also outlined plans for medical insurance cover of $66,000 for every frontline health worker. Following the Indian Premier's lockdown announcement, trucks are stranded at state borders and people could be seen queuing up for essentials.
U.S. President Donald Trump has signed the Taiwan Allies International Protection and Enhancement Initiative Act into law. The bipartisan Taipei Act says the U.S. should support Taiwan in strengthening its alliances amid Chinese pressure. After Senate, the House of Representatives also unanimously passed the bill on the 4th of March. Under the legislation, the US will consider reducing its economic, security, and diplomatic ties with governments that undermine Taiwan. The US will also advocate for Taiwan's membership in all international organizations where statehood is not a requirement. In response, China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian has called the Taipei Act a severe violation of the One China principle. Russia's President Vladimir Putin has signed a law to fix prices for medicines in case of the pandemic threat in the country. Under the law, the government will have the right to set the maximum possible retail prices for medicinal products, apart from the list of vital necessities. The government will also set the maximum selling prices for producers and allowances for them, taking into account value-added tax. It will be executed in the event of an epidemic, emergency, or if the cost of drugs is unreasonably increased by more than 30% within 30 days. Meanwhile, President Vladimir Putin says Russia can defeat the pandemic in less than 3 months if it imposed tough measures.
The colleague believes that in 2-3 months we will be done with the coronavirus. This is not a bad outlook, because in some countries they say that fight against it, they call it a war, will be very long. But when we finally get out of this situation, and we definitely will get out of it.
7 people have been killed in a fire that engulfed a 2-story residential building in Russia's city of Yekaterinburg. Russian Emergencies Ministry says another person suffered severe burns and is hospitalized. In a statement, the ministry said the bodies of all victims have been found. Russia's Interior Ministry says the fire may have been deliberately lit, but they are still investigating the exact cause. We have a lot more coming up right after this short break, so stay tuned. Welcome back. The UN Security Council has asked the Libyan warring parties for an immediate ceasefire, expressing concerns over the military escalation on the ground. In a statement, the Council urged parties to allow humanitarian aid to reach people across the country. The Security Council called on member states to commit to the arms embargo on Libya. The Council expressed grave concerns over the impact of coronavirus pandemic in the war-torn country. Earlier this week, Khalifa Haftar's Eastern Forces and Government of National Accord exchanged multiple attacks in Tripoli. Yesterday, government forces made gains in the fighting as its troops seized the Al-Watia air base. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, government troops have killed 10 members of a rebel group accused of ethnic massacres in the country's restive Eastern Territory. The military said the commander of the group was also wounded during the shootout. The military added the fighters belong to a local militia called the Cooperative for the Development of Congo. It's an armed political religious sect in Ituri drawn from the Lendu ethnic group. According to a UN report, the ethnic conflict in the gold and oil-rich province has killed 700 people since late 2017. The report adds over 500,000 people have been displaced by the violence since February 2018. In Indonesia, an earthquake of 5.9 magnitude has rattled the eastern province of Papua. The Pacific Tsunami Warning Center has issued warnings for Severo, Sahalin, and the Hawaiian Islands. Indonesia's Meteorology, Climatology, and Geophysical Agency says the earthquake struck 44 miles northwest of Jayapura district. There are no reports of casualties or property damage so far. The Southeast Asian country is one of the most disaster-prone nations on earth. The new coronavirus has set in motion a major economic crisis that will burden societies for years to come. Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development chief Angel Guri says it has led to the third and most serious economic and social shock of the century.
Guri said over one-third of OECD households are financially insecure and will get into poverty if they have to forego 3 months of income. Meanwhile, the global economy is expected to contract by 0.5% in 2020 due to negative impact of the coronavirus. The credit rating agency Moody's said despite massive stimulus measures, the financial sector's volatility has exploded to levels last seen during the 2008 global crisis. In Europe, leaders failed to agree on the scale of support for their economies. Germany and the Netherlands blocked a call from Italy, Spain, and France to issue joint debt of 2% of their economic output from the European Stability Mechanism. To fight the pandemic's fallout, World Bank has unveiled an additional $160 billion relief package in financial support over the next 15 months. Last week, the global lender approved a $14 billion package focusing on immediate health and social consequences of the pandemic.
Chinese telecom giant Huawei has ended dependence on Google by introducing a flagship smartphone that uses none of the Android maker's apps. The development comes after the US authorities blacklisted the company. The new Google free P40 smartphone is another attempt by China to show off its technological prowess. After the US restrictions, Huawei has had to forego Google's Android operating system and a plethora of applications that run on it. The company is progressively eliminating Google software from its phones after having shipped its first Google free model last year. The P40 smartphones were sold in France, Germany, and Italy with a new European search engine called Quant instead of Google. South Korea's auto giant Honda Motors has halted operations at plants in Russia and Turkey due to the new coronavirus pandemic. The auto giant says its plant in Turkey will be closed today and no date has been set for its resumption. The Hyundai plant in St. Petersburg will be closed from Sunday till April 3rd as President Vladimir Putin declared a nationwide paid holiday next week. Last week, Hyundai suspended production at its plant in the US after an employee tested positive for the virus. The auto giant has also suspended its plant in Czech Republic and in India. Hyundai has 7 domestic plants and 10 overseas plants. These include 4 in China, 1 each in the US, Czech Republic, Turkey, Russia, India, and Brazil. European stock markets are trading lower as recession fears mount amid a record jump in US jobless claims due to fallout from the coronavirus pandemic. Investors are trading cautiously as regional stocks struggle with continuous sell-off. London's FTSE 100 is trading 4% lower. CAC 40 in Paris has lost over 2.5%, while Frankfurt's DAX is trading over 1.5% lower. In Asia, Nikkei 225 led the gains, closing about 4% higher. Seoul's Kospi gained about 2%, while Shanghai Composite closed fractionally higher. Meanwhile, international benchmark Brent crude oil price is trading fractionally lower, shedding early gains. Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.